Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. So for today's Stephen King episode, I will be discussing my top 10 favorite Stephen King first lines, but from his short stories. So last week I did the same thing, except I talked about his best first lines, my personal favorites from his novels and his novellas. So go check that out. I'll link that down below if you haven't seen it yet. But for this video, I will be talking exclusively about his short stories. So the best first lines, at least in my opinion, from all of his short stories. And Stacey was actually a big help because I was reading all of these first lines to her, and he has well over 100, maybe even like 150. So she was a big help. So I have my top 10 list, and at the end of the video, I will talk about her honorable mentions, ones that I liked, but ones that she really liked. But this is my personal top 10. These are my favorites, and I was fairly surprised because some of my favorite Stephen King collections didn't make the top 10, and then some of my least favorites actually had quite a few. So it kind of just goes to show you that just because you have a banger of a first line doesn't necessarily mean that the story itself is going to be great. Because some of my least favorites short stories that King has written, one painfully obvious one in this video, has a good first line, but overall it's just, So his first lines don't always translate to being great stories, but I'm only basing these off of the first line alone. So, with all of that being said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. So for now, I'm just going to go in chronological order, and then maybe at the end, I'll give like my top favorite one, and then maybe like my top 3 or top 5. But for right now, I'm just going to go in chronological order, obviously starting with Night Shift, which is personally my favorite of his short story collections. 5 out of 5, although there's one story in here that I think keeps it from being like absolutely perfect. And ironically, that is the one that has probably the best first line in the collection. And I'm of course talking about Night Surf, which almost unanimously is everyone's least favorite in this collection. It's not like terrible, but it's not very good at all, and it pales in comparison to all of the rest of the stories, which in my opinion all are very good. But the first line in Night Surf is, "After the guy was dead and the smell of his burning flesh was off the air, we all went back down to the beach." Killer first line, and that's probably the best part of this short story, because after that kind of goes downhill from there. But yeah, it's a really good first line. Like, the smell of his burning flesh, like, you got that in your first line and you're doing pretty good. So it's a really good first line, but of course after that, yeah, it's not good. This is definitely the worst in the collection, at least in my opinion. And also just comment down below when I talk about all of these first lines what your opinions are and what are your favorite first lines from his short stories. Just let me know. Do you agree that this one's great? Because, there's tons of great stories in here, but oftentimes, more than not, his first lines are just kind of meh, or they're very forgettable. But that one, it's pretty good. Also, from Night Shift, we have one of my favorites in the collection. Not my absolute favorite, which would be like Quitters Inc. or The Ledge or The Last Rung on the Door, or yeah, Last Rung on the Ladder. Not Last Rung on the Doorway. I am the doorway. I am not the doorway. I digress. But one of my favorites is The Mangler, which also has a great opening line, which reads, "Officer Hunton got to the laundry just as the ambulance was leaving, slowly, with no siren or flashing lights." So it sets up the conflict right away. It also sets up the setting and the character. So it establishes a lot just in the first line alone. And intriguingly, it's got the ambulance was leaving slowly with no siren or flashing lights, meaning that there's got to be some dead bodies probably, because they're not like rushing to save this person. Like, this person's dead. So very intriguing first line. And yeah, definitely one of my favorites in Night Shift. Like, the story is great and the first line is great as well. And like I said, we are going in chronological order, and the next one would of course be Skeleton Crew. However, reading through all of the first lines in these short stories, I did not find one suitable to be in my top 10. Now, there will be, I think, at least one in Stacey's honorable mention towards the end, so uh, stay tuned for that. But honestly, a lot of these were kind of just okay. Like there was a couple like in the runnings, like maybe some honorable mentions would be like Uncle Otto's Truck, but overall these just did not really have really great first lines. There will be one at the end where it's Stacey's honorable mention, but overall it's a pretty good collection. Honestly, a little overrated in my mind because it does have some standout ones, but it also has some duds. And I'm not counting The Mist either because I'm only trying to count short stories. The Mist is a novella, but honestly, the first line in that is just kind of dumb. This is what happened. So it is what it is. Skeleton Crew did not make my top 10 at all. Might piss some people off, but honestly, not really any good first lines in here, at least in my opinion. There's some good ones, but they're not great. Next up, we have one of my all-time least favorite Stephen King collections. And in fact, it is my least favorite collection. I don't know why I said that, but yeah. My least favorite collection of his is Nightmares and Dreamscapes. But surprisingly or not, there's some really good first lines in this collection. 3 of the stories in here made my top 10, so very surprising, and also goes to show you that just because you have a great first line doesn't mean the story itself is going to be fantastic. But the first one that I have to talk about is one of the best short stories in this collection, and that would be The End of the Whole Mess. And the first line in here is excellent. I want to tell you about the end of war, the degeneration of mankind, and the death of the Messiah, an epic story deserving thousands of pages and a whole shelf of volumes. But you, if there are any of you later on to read this, will have to settle for the freeze-dried version. Fantastic first line, sets up like a story of epic proportions, but obviously it's a short story, so it's like, okay, we're going to get kind of a quick version, rundown of it, but it's just an epic way to open a short story. And if you know what the short story is about, it's very fitting, and it's amazing. One of his best short stories in one of his worst collections, his worst collection in my opinion. So very cool opening line there. This next story is okay, not one of the worst in the collection, but not one of my favorites either. And that would be The Moving Finger. And this one has a really stellar line as well. Very fitting. When the scratching started, Howard Mitla was sitting alone in the Queen's apartment where he lived with his wife. So that one is definitely more because of the beginning of the line, when the scratching started. So you're reading that and you're like, okay, what is with the scratching? Maybe it has something to do with the moving finger. Very intriguing first line. The story itself is okay, good, but that opening line is stellar. Another really good first line for an okay short story is Home Delivery. Really good first line here. Considering that it was probably the end of the world, Maddie Pace thought she was doing a good job. So right off the bat, you're like, okay, the end of the world. And she thought she was doing a good job. Very intriguing first line for an okay short story. So, yep. Very interestingly, like there were a lot of contenders for this collection, which I was not anticipating. I was thinking Night Shift and Skeleton Crew were going to have a bunch of really good opening lines, but not so much. But for this one, lots of contenders here. And I did end up picking 3 to be in my top 10, which I would have not figured that to be the case. But yeah, not a great collection. In fact, probably his worst in my opinion, but really stellar opening lines for the most part. And then we jump ahead a few years into Stephen King's bibliography with his next collection, Everything's Eventual. And there were some contenders here, but I ended up picking 2 to be in my top 10. Can you guess what they are down below? Maybe, maybe not. Be a fun little game here while I try to figure out what page this is on. So the first one I have to talk about is definitely one of the better short stories in this collection, LT's Theory of Pets. And the first line is definitely one of my favorites. My friend LT hardly ever talks about how his wife disappeared, or how she's probably dead, just another victim of the Axeman, but he likes to tell the story of how she walked out on him. So a lot to unpack in that sentence alone. Gets the reader very intrigued right off the bat about, problem in their marriage, and then what the hell is the Axeman? So yeah, very cool way to start off a really good story in this collection. This is kind of like a middling collection. Like, it's not great, but it's not terrible. It's pretty good. It's like average. But LT's Theory of Pets, really good short story and a really good first line. Also, just as a reminder, I'm trying not to count novellas, and there's quite a bit of novellas in here. You've got the Dark Tower novella, the titular story, Everything's Eventual, Riding the Bullet in 1408. So, like, lots of novellas in here. But the actual last story, short story in this collection is Lucky Quarter. If I can try to find it here, it's very short. But Lucky Quarter has one of the funniest opening lines, really stellar, kind of sets the mood right away. "Oh, you cheap son of a bitch," she cried in the empty hotel room, more in surprise than in anger. You throw in a son of a bitch in a first line and you're making my top 10 list, because that's a great way to open a short story. "Oh, you cheap son of a bitch." So right away you're getting a character's anger and frustration, and you're like, what is making this character so, like, So yeah, really great opening line. One of the better short stories in the collection, if I remember. But yeah, overall, just solid collection, not fantastic. But those two in particular, definitely LT's Theory of Pets is really great. And Lucky Quarter, fantastic first lines. Next up in Stephen King's bibliography of short story collections, one of my all-time favorites, possibly my second favorite just behind Night Shift, is Just After Sunset. There are a few novellas in here. There's like 3 that I obviously couldn't count for here. But sadly enough, I did not find one opening line in here from any of the short stories that made my top 10 list, which is very surprising. Because like I mentioned, like right behind Night Shift, like Just After Sunset, it's like a 4.5-star collection. I love this collection so much. But not really a lot of good first lines. Like, I was struggling. So I was trying to find a good one, but they're all just kind of fine or okay or, or like forgettable. So yeah, sad to say, Skeleton Crew and Just After Sunset did not make my top 10 list at all. Next up, we actually have a Stephen King novella collection, but I would argue that one of the stories in here counts more as a short story because it is rather short and brief. I'm, of course, talking about Full Dark, No Stars, which we recently just read for the Stephen King Book Club, and I did a dedicated book review, so go check that out for more of my thoughts on the collection as a whole. But generally, I think there's actually 3 novellas in here, 1922, Big Driver, and A Good Marriage. But the 4th one in here, I would argue, is more of a short story, and that would be Fair Extension. It's only like 30 pages, which I would argue is definitely more of a short story, and it has one of my favorite opening lines to any Stephen King short story. "Streeter only saw the sign because he had to pull over and puke." So right away, you're getting a character who's puking, and you're wondering why the hell that is, and you're also wondering what the sign is that they saw. So just a lot of intrigue right at the front. And I will say Fair Extension, one of Stephen King's most underrated short stories in general. Very dark in nature, which very fitting for Full Dark, No Stars. But also just a very good first line that pulls you right in, at least in my opinion. Comment down below if you agree or disagree, but I think it was definitely very worthy of being in my top 10. Next up in Stephen King's catalog, chronologically speaking, we have The Bazaar of Bad Dreams, which in my opinion is an okay collection. It's kind of on the same par as like Everything's Eventual. Like, it's got some good, like great stuff. It's got some okay stuff. It's got some bad stuff. So kind of all over the map. And overall for first lines, it has some good ones. I did have one short story make my top 10 list here. So which one is it, you say? Or you think? I don't know what you're doing. But anyway, I'm of course talking about The Dune, which in fact is one of my favorite short stories in this collection. As the judge climbs into the kayak beneath a bright morning sky, a slow and clumsy process that takes him almost 5 minutes, he reflects that an old man's body is nothing but a sack in which he carries aches and indignities. I love that first line a lot. Kind of shows you the judge as an old man and his thought process of getting old. And you're also very intrigued about what he's doing in this kayak. So just really cool first opening line to a really good, underrated King short story, in my opinion. There were a few other ones that I, toyed with putting in the top 10, a couple honorable mentions maybe on my part. But The Dune, I think this one takes the cake, at least for this collection. Had to have it in my top 10 list. And then I almost forgot about Stephen King's collection that came out last year, You Like It Darker. Like I said, I've been like reading these out loud, but I actually don't own a physical copy of You Like It Darker, which came out last year, and I had to go back and listen to it on audio. I had to listen through all of the opening first lines to at least the short stories, because again, there's a few novellas in here that I'm not counting, but overall, there were some good ones, but the one that was kind of more standout, which I will read to you, was from Willie the Weirdo. And also, just as a disclaimer, just because this is on audio, I can't necessarily tell if this is actually the first line or if he cuts it off or like where there's commas, because I'm just listening to it. I can't read it like text based. So if this isn't the first line, comment down below, like if you have a physical copy, and let me know if I need to change it, because I don't really know. But anyway, the first line reads, Willie's mom and dad thought their son was strange, with his careful study of dead birds and his collection of dead bugs, and the way he might look at drifting clouds for an hour or more. So, if that is in fact the first line, I think it's really good. It kind of gives a peek inside of like this character, Willie. He might be weird, and the parents think that he's a weird person as well. So, very intriguing. And then like, he's looking at dead birds and dead bugs and just kind of staring off into the clouds. So you're wondering where this is going to go, like why they're calling him weird. So yeah, I think that one's really interesting. Definitely the standout first line in You Like It Darker. So yeah, that's my top 10 list, and I'll kind of recount them here. We got Night Surf and the Mangler from Night Shift. Nothing from Skeleton Crew, although there's a couple honorable mentions on my part. Maybe something like Uncle Otto's Truck. And we have 3 from Nightmares and Dreamscapes. Very, I was not expecting that. We have The End of the Whole Mess. Very good short story. The Moving Finger and Home Delivery. We've also got 2 from Everything's Eventual. LT's Theory of Pets and Lucky Quarter. And then we have nothing from Just After Sunset, which was very surprising for me. And then we have 1 from Bizarre Bad Dreams with The Dune, which, by the way, Stacey hates apparently. Whatever. And we had 1 from Full Dark No Stars, which is a novella collection, but Fair Extension, I believe, is more of a short story, and that one has a great opening line. And we also had 1 from his newest collection, You Like It Darker, Willie the Weirdo, definitely the standout first line in that collection. So, as I mentioned, that's my top 10 list, but as I mentioned previously, Stacey, was helping me. I was reading all these short stories, and we were kind of, saying meh a lot, because we would read it and be like, meh. But she agreed for the most part on like what his best first lines are, but we did disagree a bit. Her favorites, she actually did pick one from Skeleton Crew called The Reach, which, to be fair, is one of Stephen King's better regarded short stories, and it does have a good opening line. I didn't think it was quite as good enough to make my top 10 list, but it is still very good. The reach was wider in those days, Stella Flanders told her great-grandchildren in the last summer of her life, the summer before she began to see ghosts. So really, it's kind of that last part, because if it was just like the first part of that sentence, it'd be like, whatever. But then, the summer before she began to see ghosts. That's kind of the tagline, to hook you in. So yeah, it's pretty good, but it didn't quite make my top 10 list. Next up, we have another short story from Nightmares and Dreamscapes, which I do agree is a good first line, which is crazy because I really don't like this collection, but it is a good first line. I just didn't think it was fitting for my top 10, but I'll read it here anyway. It's from The House on Maple Street. Although she was only 5 and the youngest of the Bradbury children, Melissa had very sharp eyes, and it wasn't really surprising that she was the first to discover something strange had happened to the house on Maple Street while the Bradbury family was summering in England. So for me, that goes on a bit long. I don't love when Stephen King has like long run-on sentences like that, but it is pretty good, and you're wondering like, what does this 5-year-old see that everyone else doesn't? So it is good. So I understand why she likes it. Very intriguing, but again, not quite worthy of my top 10. And then her third and final honorable mention, I just kind of disagree with. She really likes this one, but for me, it's just a bit too simplistic. It comes from Everything's Eventual, and it comes from the story In the Death Room. And the first line is, it was a death room. So very simple, very punchy, very straight to the point, and I just think it's fine. Like it's just it's a little too simplistic for me. But she likes it because it's intriguing because it's like, okay, what is this death room? Where is this death room? What's happening in the death room? So like for her, like it's a lot of questions, but for me, it's just kind of like it's just a little too simple. So I kind of have to have a happy medium. I don't want it too simple, and I don't want a run-on sentence, but it's got to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah. So I don't really like that one, but Stacey really liked it. I do like her other honorable mentions, though. All right, so that is my top 10 favorite Stephen King short story first lines and 3 of Stacey's honorable mentions. So overall, I think these were just really standout first lines in short stories. But of course, let me know down in the comments below whether you agree or disagree with me. What are your favorite Stephen King first lines from short stories, not from novels or novellas, short stories? Which ones did I snub from this list? Because I'm sure, if you do the same thing and go back and reread all of his first lines from short stories, there might be one where like, wait, this is amazing. How did he not include it? So I don't know if you're going to say it in that voice. But anyway, just in general, let me know what you thought of this video, what you thought of this idea, what you thought of the first lines in general. So just comment down below. Also, if you do want to see it, I can tackle his worst first lines from his novels, or just his worst first lines in general, if you guys want to see that. I'm not sure if I want to do that, but if enough people say that they want it, I'll do it. I'm also thinking about doing not a top 10 Stephen King's book, because I just did that a few weeks ago. I'll link that down below. But I'm thinking about doing the books that miss my top 10, so like 11 through 20, because those are books that I think are worth mentioning, that are really good. A lot of them are more like 4.5-star books, whereas probably all of my top 10 are like all 5-star books. So if you guys want to see like a ranking of like what I would rank 11 through 20, comment that down below if you are interested in that. So Stephen King just has tons of ideas I can just draw from like every week. They're a lot of fun. So I'm going to keep doing it, and hopefully you guys enjoyed as well. And if you enjoyed this video, give it a quick thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Stay subscribed for more content. I try to post every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Stephen King Fridays, of course. And I've got the Bookist Tournament Discord, where we've got tons of buddy reads and read-alongs, and the Long Walk Readathon. The printer just started doing like a clean mode like by itself, and I don't know when it's going to stop. Is it done? Oh, God, come on. All right, now I think it's done. Anyway, like I was saying, the Long Walk Readathon, which starts on October 1st, you have to sign up before October 1st. Long Walk Readathon, very loosely based on the Long Walk novel by Richard Bachman, Stephen King, obviously. Very fun time. It's competition-based. It's going to be a lot of fun, so sign up on the Bookist Tournament Discord if you want to join in that badness and that fun. Also, link down below is my Patreon link, my Patreon page, if you want to go support me there for as little as $1 a month. Get access to all kinds of stuff, including early access to all readathons and the Patreon wheel spin, and early access to thumbnails and videos, and of course my Amazon wish list if you want to go buy me a book. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a fantastic day.